Okay, so we are now officially back. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to you, sir, to your own show. We Will Defend. We took a little break. We retooled a little bit. Big news is we're on video now. Hello, internet. Hello, world. This is what we look like. This is our faces. I hope you like it. We've worked on them our entire lives, and this is about the best that we can manage. So I hope you're into it. Let me introduce the host with the most. Representative and now majority floor leader,
right?
Brian Postumus. How you doing, Brian?
I'm doing well. Always good to be back on the show.
Fantastic. Yeah, back on your own show.
Right.
Good to have a show again. Good for me to be back on. I'm Joe. I run the social and the new media here for the Reps office, and we've been having a lot of fun the past couple of years. So let's just frame it here up at the top. So the reason this show exists is because I've just noticed you're really good at explaining stuff. Like when we're in our chats, when we're in our texts and our meetings at work, like if I have a topic I'm not sure about, you never really leave it to staff. You'll answer the question yourself pretty explanatorily. Is that a word? Or like
I don't think that's a word.
Well, yeah, but maybe that can be our first branded coffee mug, explanatorily.
Our first strategery.
But yeah, exactly. But this is just something I've noticed you're skilled in, is explaining things. And so I'm like, we might as well record this, and we might as well make it sort of our show. Starting out. So we're basically going to have 3 sections of each. We're going to have a warm up. We're going to have the main event, and then we're going to have a cool down, kind of back in your athletic days, back in high school. You'll be familiar. And just to kind of open it up a little bit, I wanted to say this is the 160th anniversary of President Lincoln's assassination. So I know Lincoln's one of your big historical heroes. As we get started here, it's kind of poignant to get started with him. Why don't you just tell us a bit about why you think Lincoln matters so much to you, and why you think he matters so much to modern Republicans, why he should still matter to modern Republicans.
So first of all, he's my favorite president, I think. Probably my favorite president. And I think one of the things that I admire so much about him is that he wasn't so arrogant. I'm trying to think of the best way to put it, but he was the type of person that was okay with surrounding himself with people that disagreed with him. He didn't need to surround himself with yes men. He didn't need to surround himself with people that always agreed with him on everything. He purposely surrounded himself with people that would challenge him and question him and make sure that it kind of held him accountable to ensure that he was making the right decision every single time. One of my favorite books about him is Team of Rivals, which talks about that. And so that's one of the things that I love about him. And, he obviously I'm a Republican. And so President Lincoln being the first Republican president, that I think that's pretty cool. And just that story about that time in our country's history is incredible. I mean, the Republican Party was founded for the purpose of ending slavery. And then the very first president that the Republican Party put forward, which was Abraham Lincoln, accomplished that. Now it took a civil war to do that, which is unfortunate. But if it wasn't for the Republican Party being founded and President Lincoln being the president, the slavery would have lasted a lot longer than it did.
What do you most hope that the Republican Party today learns from the example of Abraham Lincoln?
I think, one of the things that conservatism has gotten away from is finding a set of ideals and just going after it. Knowing that, a significant portion of the country may disagree with you. You have to settle on what is right and focus on that and just lead on those issues. That's what I hope we can bring back from when Lincoln was president.
Mm. I mean, yeah, it does feel like there was this crystal clear, here's what we're going to do, here's what we stand for, and also here's who was on our team. Like, they had a really strong group of not just presidential people, but legislators, and at the state level, the county level, they really built a coalition. And you're right, we're kind of rebuilding that now with the second Trump administration and the emergence of new Republican leaders. And as we build out some of those ideals, if you were at like the convention for assembling this new party or this new way of thinking for the conservative movement, what would be like your one rider? Like, I really need this to get in. Like, we can't do this, or we have to do this for the next 5 years, or we're going to be in trouble.
I think if we could if we could do it, it would be ending corporate welfare.
Hmm. What does that mean for people who maybe aren't as plugged into that battle as you are?
So corporate welfare is the act of the government giving money to companies, to well-connected companies for the purpose of, that company's investment. Typically it's the biggest, wealthiest companies in the world that tend to be the best connected, and so they tend to get additional funding from the government. And my view is, it doesn't have the positive effect that we want it to have. Not to mention the fact, what about all of the other thousands of companies that may be in competition with the companies that are getting funded from the government?
Is that fair?
Right. And so that's the number one, probably, and I'm sure there are other issues, but that's just one that's always really bothered me. And for me, my view is the only corporate subsidy that should ever exist. There really is, in my opinion, only one, and that is insurance for agriculture. And it's only for insurance purposes, because with agriculture, you ride or die by the weather, by the climate, something that you can't control for. And if you have a drought for a year or 2 years, that could decimate the entire industry, put all of our farmers out of business, which creates a pretty big national security threat when the people that are producing your food are no longer housed in your own country.
Yeah. And people may have forgotten this, but farmers make food. People like food and to eat it. So keeping them around you're right. Farmers are always on a bubble economy sort of by default, because your crop is always your bubble. And so having a catch against that is good. But in general, you're saying the Republican Party we got to take a way more hardline stance in all these kickbacks, all these government loopholes and handouts, because the people that know how to play the game are manipulating it at this point. Yeah.
Well,
I think that seems,
and they have the money to hire the lobbyists in order to lobby for the money. And so, my farm doesn't have the money to do that. My business doesn't have the money to do that. And most businesses don't. It's just the very well connected, largest companies in the world. They're the ones that have the ability to do it.
Like those people outside your session chamber every time in
right.
nice suits. You talk about those people, yeah,
oh yeah,
who are waiting to flag you down and try to catch your eye on
right.
something. But it certainly would be nice to see a little bit more accountability there. But speaking of new leaders, let's ramp it up a little bit. Let's go to level 2 here. Let's get into the meat of the game here, which is actually the state of the game. I think you are, like I said, so good at explaining things. You've mentioned many times that Michigan is going to be the most important state in America for the next 2 years in terms of the leaders that are coming up out of here, the policies that are coming up out of here, and the battleground that it really, really has become, now that especially places like Ohio have retreated as true battleground states. Michigan has become so important in the North. How would you set the table for someone who's like, hey, I just got off the train. I know that this is a big time for American politics. What's going on in Michigan? Like, how would you sort of walk them through this web right now? Who are the players and what are they doing?
Well, so first of all, let's lay the groundwork for why Michigan is such a critical state. So right now, Michigan is in the Rust Belt. Historically, for a long time, it was, from a presidential election, it was reliably blue. And now everything else, like, we've gone back and forth on governor. Republicans controlled the legislature for a long time, both chambers of the legislature for a long time. And so in a lot of ways, like in non-presidential years, it was relatively red. But in presidential years, it was relatively blue. And now it has gone back and forth. In 2016, Trump won Michigan. In 2020, Biden won Michigan. In 24, Trump won it again. The Democrats took control of the governor's office, the Senate, and the House back in 22. 22. and then Republicans took back control of the House of Representatives in 24. And so it truly is becoming this purple state. And
Yeah.
and we are the bedrock of manufacturing in Michigan, or in the United States. We have for 100 years. We're the arsenal of democracy. That is Michigan. We are home to Ford and Chrysler and GM. And so as we look at the battleground of the policy issues surrounding, blue collar workers and manufacturing and the middle class, that is embodied here in Michigan. And so, and then coming up into 26, we have everything is up for grabs, right? The governor's office is open. All of the other statewide offices, so Secretary of State, Attorney General, Lieutenant Governor, they are all up for an open seat to be filled. U.S. Senate, we have a U.S. Senate race. For the very first time in history, the state of Michigan has an open race for U.S. Senate and open race for governor in the same time. That hasn't happened since we've elected U.S. senators by popular vote.
So this is the most change possible for the state of Michigan that has ever existed, is existing in 2026.
Yep, and the House of Representatives is up, and the state Senate is up. So it is a critical cycle for the state of Michigan.
Yeah. And for the country, do you see us as being like a petri dish, a microcosm of what the rest of the country is sort of like? As goes Michigan, goes the country, as they used to say about where I used to live, Ohio.
About Ohio, I think there's some truth to that. Like, yes, I would tend to agree. If Michigan goes a little bit more heavily red, then I think the rest of the country will. And at least, move a couple points to the right. If it goes blue, then I think the rest of the country will go a couple points to the left.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that is because of, obviously a lot of it is the political reality you just outlined, the push and pull that we've gone through for the last few decades. But to what extent do you see this being a factor of pure demographics? Like, is Michigan so well balanced in terms of age and students and older people that we can create this type of purple state? Or do you think it's something less basic than that?
I think it's more about I think it's more about the middle class and the blue collar atmosphere in Michigan, right? Like, we're not like New York, or we're not like the coastal elites where you have all of these people that are. It's such a homogenous group and state. Like, so like the coastal states are such a homogenous group that are all these coastal elites that they all go left. They think they're smarter than everybody else. They tend to agree with the progressive far left identity politics that they want to put in. Whereas in Michigan, you see this with a lot of blue collar middle class, upper middle class voters, that they just want to be left alone, right? They want to have a government that works for them, rather than the other way around, and they just want the government out of their business to let them raise their family and work in peace, build their business in peace, and just live their own life.
I like that. That sounds actually really nice these days. And then obviously on this show, with you being an elected person yourself, we don't want to talk specifically about ongoing races or candidates. We don't want to edge people's vote one way or the other. So I think a safe way maybe to do that is to limit our conversations so far to people that aren't in any of these races, but do kind of give us an interesting glimpse at what's happening in Michigan and the race and the competition that's sort of heating up. Top of the list would be a guy named Pete Buttigieg, who everyone thought was going to run for either governor or senator, pulled out. A lot of people think that's just to focus on running for president. Do you agree with that, or do you think that there's more keeping him out of Michigan than just an eye for the White House?
I think it's mainly an eye for the White House, but the reality is it's hard to run in any state when you literally move, when you just moved there a few years earlier. When you're running a statewide race and you've never lived in Michigan your entire life, and all of a sudden you're like, yeah, I'm gonna plop into Michigan, and 4 years later run for U.S. Senate. That's a hard sell. That's a really difficult sell. But I think I think he has his eyes on the White House and is planning on running for that.
Hmm. And does that make sense to you? Like, should things like, are people already moving that way towards, obviously politics starts, decades out for some of these campaigns and elections, but how much of what people are seeing in 2026 should they be seeing as tryouts, as it were, for 2028?
I think tryouts for 2028 is probably the wrong way to look at it, because if you look at 2026, people that are running for something in 2026, like if they're running for U.S. Senate, you have to, so you run for U.S. Senate, so you campaign for 2 years, run in 2026, get elected, and now all of a sudden you have to turn around and run another national campaign for president. It's been done. It's rare. I don't know. That's just not a situation that happens very often.
You would need a huge amount of power, money, all that stuff to keep that machine going.
Right. And you almost need to be pre-coronated,
yeah.
And it's just such a rare situation that would happen. I mean, I think the two people that I can think of on the top of my head that got the closest to that, I believe, if I remember right, President Obama got elected and then turned around and ran for president 4 years later, I believe. I'm 95% positive. He got elected to U.S. Senate in 2004 and then launched his campaign for president at the DNC convention in 2006. And I guess he didn't launch it, but you know what I'm saying. And then ended up getting elected in 2008. And then Marco Rubio, if I remember correctly, the first time he ran for president, I'm pretty sure that was 4 years after he first got elected to the Senate.
And worked out well for one, not so well for the other, although Rubio's doing okay these days.
I think Marco Rubio is in a pretty good spot. He's not president, but he's the Secretary of State, so.
He's not in space, but he's hanging out at NASA an awful lot.
Right.
And then on the Republican side, the kind of last, because there's many, top line Republican leaders who have already announced for different races, and you can find those all over Google and the news. But the one who's sort of still an outlier that we can talk about is one Tudor Dixon, who has said that she will run for either Senate or governor, or is weighing both those options right now, and seems like the person who could sort of, right now we're in NFL draft season. Everyone's like, okay, if Aaron Rodgers goes to the Steelers, that changes their whole situation. It feels like that a little bit right now with Dixon and these elections. Like if she goes Senate, that changes a lot of people's mind. If she goes governor, that changes what 10 other people are going to do. Where do you see her landing, or do you think she's a bit too unpredictable to pin down at this point?
I really don't know. My guess is she doesn't run for either of them. And she stays in the world that she's kind of building for herself right now as a media personality and podcast host. I think that's probably the route she's going to go. But if she gets into one or the other, I suspect it will be the governor's race.
Gotcha. Which is, and we won't mention names, but it is very crowded over there. In the governor's race. Which means it'll be an epic primary on both sides. If you look at the Democratic side and the Republican side, this to me feels like where the 2.0 leaders of the, next 2025 to 2035 decade are all stepping up to the plate on both sides of the party in pretty big ways. In general, do you think it'll be an R or a D who takes this thing home for both races?
As it's shaping up right now, I think there's no question a Republican is going to win the race for governor. Okay. I think Mike Rogers just announced again that he's running for the U.S. Senate, and I think he has a pretty good chance of beating whoever is the Democrat nominee. So I think it's almost like I feel very confident on a Republican winning the governor's race.
And we'll talk about the governor side of that for a second, because I feel like almost some people would say, hey, Trump just won the presidency. There was a bit of a red spike. Everyone's going to be feeling blue at the ballot box. Why do you think that a Republican has the edge for such an important governorship?
Well, for one, I think Mike Duggan running as an independent is going to make it much more difficult for a Democrat to win. So Mike Duggan is the mayor, the current mayor of Detroit, and he's a lifelong Democrat. Left the Democrat Party to when he announced that he was running for governor. And so, I mean, he's the mayor of Detroit and a lifelong Democrat. And I think it's likely that he'll pull a decent amount of support from whoever the Democrat nominee is in the general election. And so that'll open up the door for a Republican to win, whether it's Eric Nesbitt or John James or any of the Mike Cox, any of the Kevin Rinke, I think is out there looking at potentially jumping into the race. I think whoever wins the primary is likely to win the governor's race.
Right. Wow. And then talk to me about Duggan for a second, because he's a bit of a Detroit and a Michigan ingenue in a way, but like he's not terribly well known around the country. What does he gain by running as an independent? And wouldn't you think a lifelong Democrat would not want to split his party quite that way?
So first of all, I think he's always been kind of a unique Democrat. Do I think he's truly independent? No, he's definitely left of center. But he's always had some unique positions that make it like kind of like you can kind of see it. And he's always gotten along relatively well with Republicans when Republicans were controlling the legislature and the governor's office. So like you can kind of see it, but he's definitely left of center, right? And so I think he decided to run as an independent primarily because he views it as his best path to win. I think he knew that he was going to have a hard time getting through a Democrat primary, whether it was Pete Buttigieg that was going to be leading it or Jocelyn Benson that was leading it. I think he knew that he was going to have a hard time. And so independent was his path of least resistance.
Interesting. And that does seem to be what politicians flow to, is that path of least resistance wherever they can find it.
Yeah. And another thing to think about, like, nobody should be sleeping on Duggan. He is one of the best politicians I've ever met. Keep in mind that he won as a write-in candidate for mayor of Detroit against Detroit's second son. Like he was a write-in candidate and won as a write-in against Benny Napoleon.
And won.
And won.
And then served,
and that was
by a lot of metrics quite successfully.
Yeah, that was 2014 and so he was there for 10 years, oversaw the Detroit coming out of bankruptcy and the restructuring of the city of Detroit, with Governor Snyder. And so it's been interesting.
One of the greatest bipartisan successes of the modern era was the restructuring of Detroit.
Certainly in Michigan, for sure.
Oh yeah, that would not have worked without both sides of that coin, for sure. And the way they faced the emergency was great. And that was Governor Snyder who was in office, yeah?
Yep.
Yeah, he was pulling the strings there for sure. And as we lead up to that, we're starting to see some, I don't know if the first fireworks are starting to pop off a little bit, especially for Michigan. We had a very interesting, as we move to our final topic, which I think we'll try to keep related to politics, but a little more interesting, a little more of the moment, a little more, maybe like flashy, shall we say. But our governor was, by some accounts, shanghaied into the Oval Office by the President of the United States. By some accounts, invited warmly in for a meeting between two respected colleagues. But the famous picture that's there now is, and this is the question I really want to ask you. She's seen as like either looking sullen or confused or literally hiding behind folders in the meeting. What I would like to know is, you're also a politician. What would you do if you were, let's flip it and say you were invited into a Biden meeting 4 years ago or 2 years ago, and there was the same thing, executive orders being signed that you don't agree with. How would you play that? I'm interested, as a hypothetical, what your game plan would have been. Immediately, there's a problem.
Yep.
What do you do next?
Well, anytime you're invited, I would say this. Number one, I never would have allowed myself to have photos taken of me hiding behind like folders. You know what I mean? Hiding my face. That
Yeah.
just never would like
Can't do that.
there's two things that you do. You have your stern face on, right? As the president is reading executive orders that you disagree with, you put your stern face on, and the reality is you make light of it.
Yeah.
That's
Embrace the moment.
that's how I would have been. And look, maybe Governor Whitmer's been in the Oval Office a lot. I haven't. I would have. Whether I agree with what's happening in the Oval Office or not, I'm going to enjoy my time there because I've never been in the Oval Office. You know, how
Exactly.
historical is that? Like how incredible of an opportunity is it to be in the Oval Office? And so that's the other piece of it that I really didn't like is that there should have been a little bit of respect for the moment, even though you vehemently disagree with what's being discussed and what's being done. That's fine. At least have some respect for the fact that you are in the Oval Office. The president is sitting behind the resolute desk and signing executive orders, right? Like that's kind of my view.
I completely, that totally tracks with what you talked about a lot before about like how respect for the office should take precedence over a lot. I mean, obviously there's extreme situations and people, break the rules of decorum, and you're a floor leader and sometimes you have to, employ the rules of the floor to keep decorum and whatnot. But usually there's a lot of respect in this field, and you have a lot of respect amongst your Democratic colleagues and vice versa. And it did feel like she got in the room and the moment immediately went to, I'm in trouble. How do I own my messaging instead of I have an opportunity. How do I own this moment?
Yeah.
I'm like you said, I'm in the Oval Office. I'm with the president. I'm here to represent the people of Michigan. Whether or not this is something they're doing for my benefit, I'm going to make it good. You can intend something for bad, but that's, I think, the more practiced political response people were expecting from someone at Whitmer's level.
Yeah.
And so it was surprising to see her kind of get caught, obviously literally caught by cameras, but to function, a bit below her pay grade. It felt like a poor showing from a very strong politician.
So my guess is she was totally taken by surprise. I'm sure she was totally 100% taken by surprise, but still, it seems to me like the way I would have handled it was I would have gone in there. I would have taken in the moment because, like I said, I've never been in the Oval Office. But just like any other Sunday, when you disagree with somebody from the other party, but then when you leave and you do media when you leave, that's when you make light of it. That some people have been saying that the governor was trying to make light of it when she covered her face. Frankly, I doubt that. But even if that's the case, you do that after the fact in the media. You make a joke about the fact that you didn't know what was going on.
Locking into the play for the moment and saying, hey, look, they might have caught us, but you don't and you don't want to let them know you're rattled either,
Right.
right? Even if you are caught off guard, you don't want, like when you played football, you didn't go over to the guy that hit you and say like that, you really got me. Like I'm very scared of you. Like you let that, you kind of try to hide that with your face. So obviously anytime you're in anywhere for more than a minute and there's 20 cameras taking pictures of you, they're not all going to be good.
Right.
But I think the one of her sort of literally trying to duck the photos just felt so bizarre. And I guess what everyone's wondering now, and I'm curious your take on this as we close out here. What does this do? Like, was this a win for her or not? Like, would you count? And maybe it comes down to how she handled it, but would you put this if you were on the governor's sort of payroll, which would be a very strange day. But if that ever happened, would you say, hey, that was a win for us, or that was definitely a setback?
Setback, I think, is the wrong word, but it certainly wasn't a win. I think it was a misstep, and is it going to impact her 6 months from now? This alone, no. The question is, and again, look, historically, Governor Whitmer has been one of the most skilled politicians that I've ever known. That's not necessarily a criticism. She's just historically been very good at maneuvering politically. And so, the last 6 months or so, I've been a little bit surprised with some of the decisions she's made. And, but we'll see. We'll see. Like I said, she is one of the leading Democrat contenders for president still. And so you don't get there without being skilled.
Yeah, and you've said many times the worst thing you can do is underestimate any type of opponent, but especially in a game like politics where it is, like you said, day to day, minute to minute, things are changing.
Yep.
So don't count anybody out. Keep reading people. Keep paying attention. But great. I think this was a fantastic return to form for you, sir. I think I was great, if that matters to you.
I don't mean to toot my own horn, but I was great.
But as we round it out and pray our videos don't get corrupted, just what do you want the people to be thinking about? Because obviously they know, follow us on Twitter, all that stuff, but just what's a thought you want to leave them with at this point in the game?
A thought that I want them to leave with. So I just started reading a book called Atomic Habits. And so this is totally non-political. But like the importance of developing your habits early in your life, or just the earliest you can start. The importance of habits and how habits can drastically improve or drastically hurt your life. Just know that.
Yeah, your life is a culmination of your habits.
100%.
I've heard that's a great book. I'll definitely have to pick that up. That's a great one. So think about your habits, people. Be nice to folks you see out there, and don't believe everything you read.
All right. Thanks, guys. See ya.